Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnik. Today is a super fun show for me because I have my pal, Xing Zheming, who I've known for several years now. He's born and raised in mainland China and spent his career all over the world, starting out as a broadcast journalist after college, and then rising to the heights of running corporate communications for HNA, the Chinese conglomerate that has airline and other big companies here in New York, and then going back to China where he launched his own very successful firm. He is the founder and president of Task Force China. Welcome to The Caring Economy, Jing.
Thank you, Toby. I'm very happy to be on the show.
I feel like because of COVID in particular, and your move back to, not even your move back to China, we just haven't caught up in person for so long. Well, no, I was going to China pretty much quarterly, mainland China, over the past 5 years, and then the world changed. So it's so great to be with you tonight, my night, your day. Zheming, tell us a little bit about your career journey, how it all began in terms of your upbringing, your education, your formation, and how you got where you got today.
Thank you, Toby. That is a very good question. I'm so flattered that I could be part of your guest because, I've been following your program and I know that you've been interviewing many of our industry leaders and also the thought leaders of the public relations, broader marketing communication, also the CSR field. So I've been very privileged to be part of this show. And, I would be very happy to share more about what's going on in China because, as you said, I've been working internationally. I've been helping different companies to communicate in a very different cultural environment. So a little bit about myself is actually I grew up and I was raised and born in northeastern part of China. And I started college in Beijing and I majored in public relations at one of the top communication universities in China, which is called the Communication University of China. So I started this career with public relations and broader integrated marketing communication, starting at a fresh year of my college time. And then, it's a very interesting journey because I can speak very good English and I always wanted to be a news anchor. So I've been trying to train myself in two tracks. One is to be a professional communication specialist and the other way is the news anchor thing. But I think, the two jobs are actually in one track because it's all about communicating with other people with the broadcast platform or without that we use a lot of different media. So I first, right after graduation, I started my PR career with Weber Shandwick Beijing. So I was working with a corporate team. And we've been helping a lot of multinational companies to deal with their corporate communication requirements and, helping them to tackle crisis and also help them to be more prepared in front of the crisis that is happening in China, because we all understand that China has a very different media landscape and also you need to embrace or you need to deal with different type of stakeholders here in the China market. And right after, I was very happy that I could be part of the Albright Stonebridge Group Beijing team. We know that Albright Stonebridge Group was founded by Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State of the United States, and also Sandy Berger, the former National Security Advisor. So we have a team that of the China team that we have colleagues in Beijing, Washington, and Shanghai. We help multinational companies to deal with their stakeholder engagement and policy advocacy and also the government relations. And also we help many companies to deal with their issues and crises here in the China market as well. So I was very happy to be part of this conversation because at that job, we were able to enjoy a sort of honeymoon period of time between China and the United States. And I was very privileged to be able to working with so many top-notch experts related to public relations and public affairs and also international relations. And we did something very positive because our team and also our counterparts in the United States, we try to facilitate dialogue on all fronts that hope that the two largest economies by then can work better together. And right after that, I find it is a little bit frustrating because I've been working with senior executives of the international companies. global CEOs, vice chairman, and also vice president of public relations or government affairs. But I find it very interesting is that as an individual, I could be easily impress my client, during their road shows, during their engagement activities in China with the government officials. But I find that there are so many knowledge gap or understanding gaps between China and even the most successful business leaders from the West. So I find there are two ways. The one way is that for the Chinese side, Chinese people are never good storytellers. That is something that I have to frankly speak is basically, yeah, it's a stereotype, but it's sometimes the facts because we have a totally different weight of narratives. So basically trying to engage in a dialogue in an international field for some people who are not very fluent or confident in the English language or international setting, it'll be challenging for any of the Chinese people to be able to express themselves freely and confidently, like the Western style. That is one thing. And the other thing is, I do believe that the communication branch of the Chinese government or what we say that the state-sponsored media are not doing in a way that can be more relaxed and trying to tell a story that is more universal. Although I respect all of my colleagues and all those government officials that are trying to do the thing, and I think that all countries are trying to do the same thing. It's just to use a public relations, practices and to use the expertise that we draw from communication theory and even propaganda theory to influence people and to engage with more stakeholders. That is something that everybody has been doing. But I do believe that from an international perspective, the Chinese state-owned enterprises or the state-sponsored media should be, moving forward in a more market-driven way, in a more international way.
So you were at Albright, and then you went.
So then realized that I hope that I could be part of the workforce for CCTV News, which is China Central Television, the English news service. And I was very happy that I was part of the audition for an entire new team of broadcast reporters. I was very blessed that I succeeded in the audition. I get inside of the CCTV News as a reporter and also later as a sub anchor. As we said, we have a dual anchor system that we work together to put together a show. So that was a very fascinating experience because, when you are working for a foreign company or working as an agency, you are literally generating news. You are actually planning all those kind of things. But while you are working for a media agency, if you're working as a reporter, sometimes you are exploring the country, you're exploring the evidence, you're doing all things that you can do to be very investigative, to try to put together a show or a news package. So I was blessed that I've been working there for like 2.5 years with CCTV News. What I wanted to do is basically to do something that is different from the traditional way of Chinese narratives going global. I wanted to tell a story that is more human, that is more diverse, that is more how to say that in a way that people wanted to understand about China, because everybody is wondering how this country can develop so fast and what happened over the years, any things that we can learn from and any of the disadvantages that we can avoid. So I think that is a job that is very interesting.
Could you give us an example of one of those moments where you sort of put the human element into the story?
Actually, I think, working as a reporter, especially for CCTV News, because they're one of the most influential media outlets here in China. So for instance, like the August 12th in 2015, there were two major blasts or explosions taking place in the port of Tianjin, right like 200 kilometers from Beijing. So it was a very disastrous event that, one of the warehouse of the Tianjin port actually went explosion. I was the first English-speaking news reporter covering the issue. I actually understand that it was very urgent, so I I took a cab and just to drive me like 3 hours, and then we were there with my cameraman. So when you are there at the very front line of reporting a disaster like this, and also the fire is still burning, the explosions are taking place occasionally after the main explosions, you find that it's urgent, not necessarily to figure out what has happened, but what can be done. The first thing is the thing is still evolving, and we know there are chemicals, there are some explosive that are still in dangers. Mm-hmm. So as a reporter, you don't necessarily wanted to criticize or started to finger point what's going on, who is doing wrong. You wanted to care about the vulnerables. Yep. You wanted to care about the local government, how they evacuate the local residents. You wanted to know how the wounded are treated in the in the hospitals, and also you wanted to know how the corporations are living because their operations are suspended, and you wanted to cover a lot of things. So these are the things are non-ideological. It is for I was just following the instinct of a reporter that wanted to discover the truth. And you try to bring something that is live and that is fresh and that is not finger pointing at the very beginning of this event. You find that first of all, you fulfill the responsibilities that you have as a reporter. And the other thing is that when you have a human angle, you find that your stories are very, very touching in a way that you presented facts, you presented the reality, and also you hope that things can move forward. I think other people may judge that there is always a state sponsorship within the media outlet, like everybody's been criticizing that there is no such for the reporters. But actually what I can say is that we enjoy a certain level of freedom when we wanted to cover something that is newsworthy, that is journalistic. And also the challenge is basically, we always say that you can never judge a book by its cover. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of international audience watching the Chinese state sponsored, because nobody can be, everybody is vulnerable, or everybody is suffering from their own stereotypes. So nobody can really looking into a issue or other people in a very objective way. But what I've been trying to do is just, how can I do something that can actually get people heard first and try to understand, to know the facts before they judge.
Which seems to be sort of one of your career talents, really. So from CCTV, you move on, but throughout, you've always put, I think, a higher purpose in your work, in your storytelling as a journalist, your reporting and research and whatnot, to your corporate communications and public affairs work, which is so consistent with the message of the caring economy, right?
Yes.
You can make a living, but you can make a life by making a living while making a difference, it seems to me. So, and you've done that. So where did you, from CCTV, then you went to HNA, or how did it unfold?
Yes, I was relocated to Shanghai, and one of the field reporters in Shanghai covering the whole, we call the Yangtze Delta region news, which is one of the most economic dynamic region in China. And I was very privileged that I could be part of the G20 summit in Hangzhou in 2016. I was part of the team covering the summit. So then I pick up a call from a headhunter. He said that there is a very interesting job opportunity are you interested in? And I said, I'm totally enjoying this kind of a TV thing, because back then I was very, very dynamic. I like to go after the news, and I did a lot of really, really interesting breaking news segments. So I wasn't ready to embrace my old PR role, but actually that job was, even from now, I find that job was challenging. It's working with HNA Group. HNA Group was one of the front runners in the 1915, starting from 1915 to 2015 to 20, let's say 18.
Mm-hmm. Tell our listeners about HNA Group, because we know that some of us know the airline, premier luxury airline, but then all the conglomerate properties were truly global, and China going out into the world and investing and acquiring, right?
Yeah, so it was a very large company and a company that growing from China. They have an ambition to operate globally because the nature of their business, they're in the airline business, they're in the tourism business, they're in the logistics business, and also everything follows after that, centered with their core business on aviation.
Mhm.
So I was very blessed because, that period of time that a lot of Chinese companies are going global. It's like the Japanese are going global. It's like the Saudis, they are going global. So whenever a newcomer of globalization enters the arena, the center stage, the Westerners or the international press, everybody is curious. Why are you here? Where did you get the money? And what are you going to do after you acquire all those kind of assets? Can you manage them? And there are a series of questions. I think they're genuine, right? They're genuine in a way that people need to be responsible for their jobs, and also everybody is curious. But as I said, that it is not, it's a fresh experience for a lot of Chinese companies when they're trying to go global. It is one thing to sell their products globally, but it's another thing to manage globally. As a true global company, I think for the British culture and for the American culture, because of the nature of their culture, they're very, very, how to say that, they're global business. Right. Yeah, because of the culture thing, because of the system, the legal system, the political system,
colonialism, all of that. Yeah,
it's easy for any company from the English speaking area and even for the French companies to actually to expand globally. But for China, I think the China style globalization dates back to like 300 years ago or even earlier than that. It's just basically China has a totally different system of the regional globalization. Like, the Belt and Road, we called it, is now very being politicized issue, but actually the Silk Road and also the Maritime Silk Road was there for thousands of years, facilitating trade between the East and West. Yes. So I think, for Chinese companies, it's very difficult for them to actually to explore globalization, especially at the very frontier of public relations, how to issue a press release, how to respond to a media inquiry, and also how to deal with the different stakeholder, and also how to work, how to persuade the regulators from a different culture to understand that they come in peace. So I think that is a job that I find very fascinating because, it is a nature of business that it should be global, but actually a lot of things happen as there are geopolitical factors. There are also huge management issues within a large company. And also for globalization, every company needs to draw lessons from other frontiers. So that job gives me very interesting access that I could be traveling across the world and I can talk with different people, talk with media representatives, reporters, and engage with on behalf of the Chinese conglomerate. Find it very interesting to actually to make their debut on the international stage. So that's why we met each other in New York.
Yeah, we met thanks to Richard Edelman, as I recall, who I'd love to have on the show. But is it fair to say, though, that a lot of people back then in particular were looking at you as a representative of contemporary China and thinking money, and probably not you personally, but dumb money? There's also a stereotype that about 5 or 8 years ago, China was going out into the world and spending and investing, but it was not perceived as necessarily sophisticated. But not that it wasn't sophisticated, but in the West, I think people thought, oh, they're Chinese and they'll just pay for anything, which is not my experience at all. But I wonder how, A, if you agree that that was part of the dynamic then, and B, how you dealt with that, because you were the frontline ambassador for this Chinese conglomerate. So I'm sure people had expectations of your being the big funder and sponsor of their tennis tournament or their golf tournament.
Yeah. I have to say that is something that happens, as I said, happened to the Japanese and happened to the Middle East money. So I think that is something that people will naturally fall into those stereotypes. And of course, for Chinese people going global, you can see that, a lot of Chinese rich people, they go outside of China, they buy luxury goods, and they, a lot of people from the Western world, they believe that these are the Chinese people. They are wealthy, they're very fashion, and they wanted to live a luxurious life. And also for those kind of deals that were done during the period of, I have to say, aggressive globalization from a Chinese perspective, I do believe that the Chinese companies are paying a lot of premium trying to get the assets. It's not a fair, sometimes it's not a fair deal, but actually, a lot of people, especially in the business world, in the financial world, and also in the media world, everybody tend to be optimistic. I have to say that is something that we all need to confess. So whenever there is an opportunity, the investment banking guys, they wanted to get the deals done, and people have money wanted to get asset, and people who wanted to sell their asset wanted to get it done as soon as possible. So I think it was a climax of people getting met each other and find that there are so many synergies, and one thing led to another. There is aggressive globalization for Chinese companies. So answering your question is, yes, people just see Chinese companies as, aggressive buyers of the world, no strategic planning. And sometimes, even for some of the business leaders from China, they know that, it's aggressive and, people need to think strategically. But, from the China perspective, because China was growing very fast, and if you don't seize the opportunity, you will never have the second opportunity anymore. So I think, there is always a fine balance between risk and opportunity.
Yeah. So where we are today, sorry to interrupt, Jing, but so now contemporary China, US, during the pandemic, we're not even post-pandemic, you're further along, I think, in China, but still, we're in the moment. What's the reality now, do you think, in terms of international business and to some degree corporate social responsibility, but just more broadly, is China ready to go out into the world again? Is it going out into the world again? Is it prepared? Is it wiser now?
I think the term of globalization, the definition of globalization will be changed, will be revised because of the pandemic and because of the nationalism, because of the geopolitical fights between countries and cultures. So I think, we can, from my understanding, the globalization will never go back to where it was like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So we need to redefine the new globalization in a way for business, for governments, for NGOs, and for all those kind of philanthropic charities. From what I see is that because of the pandemic, because of the shutdown of international communication, meeting face to face and, having physical interactions with each other, get together on a reception, know more people, and get yourself, your culture, your company exposed to a wider community is what we do, right? Even with CSR and the caring economy concept, we wanted to engage with more stakeholders to get them on board of what we are doing. Yeah. So I think, at this period of time, globalization will never be the same. That is something that I think a lot of my friends also agree with me in China. And the other thing is, I find that it is even more important for companies or governments to start to re-kick off the dialogue with other stakeholders from your culture group, from your cultural group or not from your cultural group, to restart this dialogue in a more genuine and more human way. It's like what we've been saying, that although there are so many differences between China and the United States, but as the two largest economies in the world, we definitely need to work together to solve some common issues like the climate change issues, right? Yeah. So from that end, we need to be very imaginative. How can we incorporate all those kind of concepts of kindness, of responsibility, of genuine human interest into our day-to-day jobs, to depoliticize a lot of issues that shouldn't be politicized in the very first place. So that is something I think that, like you and I working in Beijing and New York, we need to do more to facilitate that kind of discussion. Is, first of all, we need to acknowledge that globalization will never be the same. And because of the pandemic, because of the nationalism, because of the geopolitical fights, understanding each other requires a depoliticized vehicle, I think, which is the CSR and the philanthropy, the caring economy concept. We need to care about each other.
Thank you very much. Again, today on the Caring Economy, it's an honor to have my pal for many years now, Xing Zheming. He is the founder and president of Task Force China. Zheming, I want to ask you a little bit more about that in terms of CSR. I agree with everything you said. And yet, after all my years in China, I feel, and I think a champion for contemporary China.
Mm-hmm.
I don't deny that there have been rough patches in China's past, to say the least, but I think contemporary China is a different story. I think of you, quite frankly, as sort of my China whisperer. I think of you as a spokesperson for contemporary China because you're in your early 30s. You understand millennial and Gen Zs, and you understand old fogies, and I just am optimistic about you, about what you
Mm-hmm.
and your peers have shared with me in my travels and work in China these past 5 years. And I feel that it's not necessarily heard or understood in the West. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you agree with that and what you might want our listeners to know that they don't know or try and understand.
I mean, going back to the question is that Chinese people are never good at telling stories. Sometimes, Chinese people are being humble and they don't want to brag things about. So for me, it's like I'm only, as I said, I graduated from a communication university of China, and I've been blessed that I grew up with a generation of young people that are so talented, they're so inclusive and international. So I think I'm part of the community that embraces diversity, embraces challenges. That is something that we see totally different from the Western world at the moment. Is because we see a lot of young people in the Western world are frustrated about everything that is going on. But
Mhm.
if you come to China, if you really get to know the people, we will find that this is not some weird thing that comes out from a very standardized national education system or anything like that. It's basically this kind of dynamics, and it's very spontaneous. Everybody, because we witness the high-speed growth throughout our career and also throughout our growing. So basically, we have faith in the future, and we know that it is only possible to work harder and to be innovative in order to get a better life.
Mhm.
We never wanted to wait for anybody to give a helping hand or just to give me the food. And there is all, and we had this conversation last year when we debuted your book here in China. Is that we said that philanthropy should be something that you don't give people the fish, you need to teach them how to fish.
Right.
So from the contemporary China, as you put it together, I think if we define that period of time, is basically, I think, after the reform and opening up in the late 1970s. So the China has been changed drastically. And some of the narratives that are controlled by the mainstream Westerners are very limited, because everybody wanted to selective articulate certain things and issues they care about. So a lot of discussions that is happening on the Western press, I find it very biased, because I can navigate both Chinese culture and English culture, and I can just be a fair judge in terms of all those kind of things, unfolding in front of me. So what I've been saying that, for a lot of people in the Western world, first of all, Chinese people are coming in peace, but it's a 1.4 billion
Right.
country. So there's always a minority group that are try to be more aggressive or tend to be. It happened in every culture. But what I can say is that every time I came back to my hometown, or if I'm done with my international travels, I came back to China, I always find that Chinese people are overwhelmingly welcoming. They're just so nice, and
Absolutely.
I think you agree with that as well. So the point is that the press, the mainstream press, because of the political issues, they wanted to demonize Chinese people. They wanted to demonize Chinese culture. But unfortunately, it is not the same. It is not the truth.
Yeah.
It's basically, if you come to China, if you interact with Chinese people, they're just simply very interesting, a community of people who enjoy life.
So, well, I would agree with that. I would say two things. One does, and I say this to clients all the time. One does not need to even get on a plane to engage with the mainland Chinese community, right? You can.
Mhm,
The Chinese diaspora is real. It's significant. It's in the higher education institutions, corporations across the world.
mhm, mhm.
And with WeChat and other means, there are ways to actually talk and get to know young mainland Chinese people without even getting
Yeah.
on a plane. And two, I have been struck over and over again with ambition, and I mean in a positive sense, the ambition of the
Mhm, mhm.
Chinese people I meet. It is not, it's about bettering themselves. They're hungry to learn, hungry to genuinely spend time and hear from me or others,
Mhm, mhm.
not to gain financially necessarily or to get anything other than better themselves. And I think it's
Yeah.
something this country, the US, has always had. It's part of what made this country great.
Yeah.
And I notice it more among
Things are changing.
companies in China than here, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah. I think the interesting thing is that we learn a lot from the Western world. It's basically if you wanted to get a bigger slice of the cake, you bake a bigger cake. But
Mhm.
now, from the Chinese perspective, from what I see from the Western world, is basically people are not only because of the growth issue, because the economies are not growing as fast as possible. So basically, people are trying to cut a bigger slice of existing cake, and people are just wanted to have this kind of a zero sum competition, which I don't think that is good for our humanity. But
Correct.
actually, from the China perspective, from even the Asian perspective, talking about ASEAN economy, talking about Southeast Asia, South Asia, when people are still living under, most of the people are living under the poverty line, they wanted better life. And when you wanted a better life, you wanted to better yourself, the only way to do that with the population growing, you need to make bigger cakes. So that comes from, if you wanted a bigger size of economy, you need more investment on infrastructure, you need to consume more energy. So that, from that sense, taking a responsibility on the carbon issue from the developing countries and even from the underdeveloped world are a responsibility from themselves, because we've already done our emission for 200 years,
Right.
right, from the industrial revolution. So you need to always care about other culture there, because they are not as well established as what most of the Western world has been enjoying over the years. So
Right.
I think that is a fair requirement, or a fair thing for everybody wanted to pursue a better
Mhm.
life. So coming back to China, what I see is basically the stereotype thing will never die. But such dialogue and conversation from different cultures, when we can disagree with each other, but we always wanted to hear the other side of the story.
So let me just ask you a little bit about quote unquote the other. So you talk about trying to go out in the world, understand the others, but in China, what's the reality with, say, the Uyghur in the West that we hear about, or LGBTQ, disabled, older folks? What is the reality for in terms of social justice in China?
First of all, from my experience growing up in China, when most people will be criticizing that, you've been, how to say it, you've been turned out to be in a very standardized, process of education, of propaganda. You maybe suffer that, but I think I turn out to be fine, because the level of freedom that I enjoy here, I think does not hurt my growing up as a decent human being, and even as an international citizen, global citizen myself. So when we touch upon all those kind of issues that are not sensitive here in China, I have friends from Xinjiang as well, and we have a lot of discussions about how to work with ethnic minorities. And even for the Xinjiang issue is, are you one of the you know are you suffering the terrorism that is actually taking place in the region?
Mhm.
Because there is always a very two standard thing, is that when you are suffering from issues that are hurting yourself, you are always being defending yourself.
Mhm.
But if something that's not happening at your front yard, you don't give you don't care that much.
Right.
So talking about all those kind of issues, especially in Xinjiang, it's been politicized. And the companies that are being part of this political game has been hurt because of their decisions. I don't have firsthand knowledge about, for instance, about the BCI thing, the Better Cotton Initiative that was happening like 1 month ago when people are just discussing about how an international initiative can be so politicized and how international companies are so misinformed by making so many important decisions for their supply chain, right? Because it's not only a political decision, it's also a business decision. And also when you're facing a large market, consumer market like China, when people are saying that, okay, we are literally not trying to be a terrible person by, imposing our advantages as the largest consumer markets by, persuading you to do something that is not up to the, standard from the Western standard. But, at least you need to be informed before you make all those decisions. So as I said, I don't have firsthand information in Xinjiang because I haven't been traveling there, but I do have friends that are telling me that is not the case. No. So before I can go in and investigate on myself, or if there is no authoritative third-party international agencies can give the evidence, I think the interesting part is that we need to trust people we trust. Mm-hmm. So that is how I get the facts that I believe that, there are frustrations from certain minority groups, especially for the LGBTQ community here, as we said, because I've been working with some very leading LGBTQ companies here in China, talking about same-sex marriage. It is not only a thing that is a legal process, but it's also a cultural process, and also it's also a Asian culture perspective thing. It's not only happening in mainland China, but it's also an issue that is open for discussion in many other Asian countries. So if you are understanding these certain issues in a more in a way that you are more informed with the historic context, with a cultural context, most of the people will never reach into conclusions this fast, and they will try to discover more. And that is something that I believe that governments across the world are losing credibility. It's because they always wanted to present themselves in a very, very genuine way. But while they're politicizing issues, while they are losing political trust with each other, the dialogues tend to be very difficult to restart.
So Zheming, I want our audience to know that if and when they want to work in China, they need to know you and speak with you, Task Force China. So how does one find you?
I mean, we tend to stay low profile because I was blessed that I could be able to working with so many renowned institutions, corporates, and also fascinating experts in the field. So I started this company in 2019. So I've been blessed that a lot of people are referring business to me, and we tend to become a boutique style, full service agency that can help people to really, really solve the issue here in China and outside China. So we help a lot of Chinese companies to engage internationally as well. So I think you can find me on LinkedIn, and also I'm on Twitter. I'm always happy to have conversations with you, Toby, because you've been a role model for me for this career. And also I think, I know you and your family for so long. And I think, post-pandemic, we would definitely do more things like this.
I'm mindful of the time, Jimmy. I want to ask you one last question about, again, corporate social responsibility, way forward. I think China is some of your clients. You're working with the largest, if not the largest, one of the largest solar manufacturers in China.
Yes.
I think there's a lot to be optimistic about coming from China on climate. But what do you think? Is China doing its part?
Yeah, I've been working with some of the world-renowned I've been working with some of the world-renowned companies that are in the renewable energy sector. And I was blessed because of, be part of this kind of journey that is moving forward in the next 3 decades, 5 decades, is trying to, we create a net zero world altogether. It is not only a job for the world United Nations in New York. It's not only a job for the major economies or the governments, but it's also a corporate thing. But why is that important? Because if we wanted to undergoing a transformative energy transition, we require an upgrade of the infrastructure that we have now. For instance, everybody is shifting to EVs, electronic vehicles. Mm-hmm. But if we are charging our EVs with non-green electricity, we are not helping the issue. Mm-hmm. We are just partly helping the issue. And if we are using the EVs that emit a lot of carbon dioxide, that means that we are not eco-friendly as well. So it is not only a job for one government, for one corporate, or even for one citizen. It is a thing that for all humanity. For instance, my clients, Longdi Group, is a listed company in China, and they are one of the largest manufacturers of PV products. So the thing is that they've been helping to innovate, and with their help, they invested a lot of money on R&D, even as a listed company. And even compared with the industry average, they invested a lot of money on R&D. And the result is, because of their lab results, because of their manufacturing facilities improvement, actually now the solar prices or the PV prices are only 10% that of 10 years ago. And why is that possible? It's not only because China is the largest manufacturing country, it is also a country that embraces a very large ambition to shift its energy sources into more renewable one. Mm-hmm. So China has a lot of places for such massive application. And then these sort of companies can use these advantages both domestically and internationally to upgrade their products in a way that most of the Western countries cannot imagine. By making cheaper products that are more available, not only to the developed countries like Germany, or like the United States, like the United Kingdom, but also for developing worlds. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is transformative in a way. And by working with all those kind of scientists, guys, and business leaders that are, majored in physics, and I find that, the way that they pursue business success is not only on how we build a bigger team. Mm-hmm. They really cared about a decarbonized world. They really care that this is something that can be solved with technology.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, today it's been such a privilege to have the founder and president of Task Force China, Xing Zheming. I hope you'll come back, because we haven't begun to scratch the surface on so many social media, TikTok, WeChat, and just much more. So Zheming, let's think of this as our first chat, and we'll get you back later this year.
Thank you so much, Toby. I'm very happy to be on the show, and it's always nice to have these inspiring discussions with you.